someone loved that thing, right? Someone gave it the care and feeding, put the time and effort in to try to come up with a design that was extensible, but yet also, not problematic. And as soon as that person rolls off onto something else and they're no longer caring and feeding for that other bit of code like they used to, then that's when I've seen things start to go sideways where, like, if while they are actively reviewing all the pull requests, for example, on that area of the code, they've got a keen eye on what to look for and, like, what they envisioned. And, they might do their part to try to communicate that out as best they possibly can. This is not meant to be a jab, but, as soon as they are not part of it, then it seems that, like, people are like, oh, well, now I can sneak in this hack, or might not even maliciously, by the way. Like, the person doing it might not even realize that what they're doing is a hack way of doing it. They just might be like, oh, well, I just need to get this done, and so here's the way to do it. Because by the way, there's, like, totally different types of personalities, right? So there's the type of personality that when they go to work on something, they want to try to make it as best that they possibly can, right? So they're going to put the time and effort in that you just referred to, versus the type of person who's just like a ticket closer, right? Like, they're just trying to, like, hey man, you gave me 15 tasks and I just want to get those done so I can go about my day. And that type of mentality, that type of person, while they are a valuable contributing member of the team, I mean, there is a certain, je ne sais quoi. No, a certain, value to having somebody like that on the team, though. They might not have the same appreciation for whatever that architecture is. And they're just like, I just need to get this thing done. And they don't realize that it's necessarily a hack that they're putting in. So that's just kind of how I've seen things evolve over time. So
you're muted. It's not working.
Dang it. So I was going to mention that I've seen it both ways, and both ways can be bad. Everything can be bad. But one way I've seen it where there's no planning ahead of time, and it just becomes like this weird sprawl where people just kind of add stuff as they need to, and there's no sort of pattern, and it's just a big mess. But I've also seen it and done my fair share of, like, creating like an abstraction that I think is really clever or good, or perfectly maps everything. I create this pattern for the application to follow, and only to find out over time that was short-sighted or didn't really fit the problem domain, or didn't fit the customers, whoever's vision of how things were supposed to work. And so you've got this bad fitting pattern that people have to work around. The right answer, of course, is to change that model to make it change that map to be closer to the terrain. But a lot of times that doesn't happen, and you got deadlines and all sorts of stuff, and so it just ends up coding around. So you've got this weird thing where it's like there's a pattern that doesn't work very well, and then the sprawl next to it. So it's kind of like the worst of both worlds. Well, I don't know which one's worse.
Well, we've talked about it on the podcast several times. Like, when you go initially create something, you don't necessarily need to put all the abstractions and all these crazy patterns in place, right? Like, get the thing working.
Yeah.
If you have a couple if-else statements, that's good. As soon as you need to add the third one, okay, now you maybe want to think about putting a pattern in place, right, to fix some of that stuff. But that's, I guess, where I was getting is, like, when you go in and you're given a task and there's already three else statement or three if statements or three switch statements or whatever, right? Do you take the time at that point to go, okay, this should be turned into, some sort of abstraction, some sort of object to where you can define these classes that can be substituted in, swapped in, whatever. Do you ever look at it and go, man, I'm spending too much time on this? Is it really worth it? Who cares that the other file was 12,000 lines long? One other if statement's not going to hurt anything. Like, I don't know. Like, how do you guys feel when you're dealing with that stuff?
I have a trick.
Okay.
A year later, I look back, and then I can tell you if it was too soon or too late.
That's good. All right.
I think it's a matter of, like, how much effort are you going to put into it though? Like back to your original question about, going the architecture route or not, or the hack route, like, definitely, there's definitely something to be said for putting, out an MVP or getting the job done. But, depending on like how much time and effort you plan to spend up front on that architecture, like, you could definitely go insane trying to like architect something to, the billion concurrent user logins and you haven't even gotten to the app yet.
Well, sometimes you need that.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, no offense to your stuff. Yeah, I get that.
Right. Sometimes you need it. I will say one thing I've noticed. So I just went through one of these refactoring efforts that I could have potentially just gone one way and thrown in another else or whatever. And I kept looking, and it just really bugged me because it was a lot of the same code, right? Like there were same block of code copied and pasted 10 times or something. And when I was going through and trying to sort of create a pattern, right? Like have a factory that would return things or whatever. One thing I noticed is a lot of these else blocks or whatever, they would copy code that was never even used. So there was a whole chunk of code in there that they would have that was specific to whatever they were trying to do. And then there was a whole bunch of other code that came along for the ride because they copied and pasted it that was just a waste and confusing to anybody that would be looking at it later. And so it was like, man, I think getting a pattern in place will make it to where people feel like it'll be easy to take one class and just, manipulate it, create a new instance of that pattern. So, but it is one of those things where, I don't know how much extra time I spent on it, but it was more than at some point you're like, man, is this worth it? And hopefully it is.
Well, I also wonder too, though, I wonder what your take is going to be on this, but how we've talked about how like whatever language you learn, like you tend to like solve your problems in that kind of mindset. So if Java, for example, was your first foray into programming, then you're going to like come at things from an object-oriented, problem solving for the remainder of your career. Right. Mm-hmm. But I didn't come from that. And now I'm kind of, but like heavily spent like the last however many, months doing this in object oriented. See what I did there? Months.
Nice.
Thank you. I wondered, like, would we be better off if we weren't doing things in object oriented patterns? Like, why did that win? Why is that so popular? Like, because sometimes I'm like, you know what? I just want to go back to the simplicity of like, here's just a simple function. You give it, as long as you put in the right things, it's going to spit back out a result and you can test it. Like, how come Java mimicked C++ type, going object oriented instead of C? Like, why isn't Haskell like more popular? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
I have a take on that. And I think it wins out because it's more easily mapped to the way we think.
Is it?
And well, so
who the hell thinks in terms of factories? Okay, hey, I need to go to the grocery store. Let me create a shopping cart factory.
Okay. So design patterns aside, though, but I mean, think about it, right? Like even JavaScript. JavaScript started out just like what you're saying, but it got to a point to where there's so many loosey-goosey errors that can occur because of types and things that are expected or not expected or whatever, right? To where people were like, we need TypeScript. And before TypeScript, there was even another one that was super popular, and I can't remember the name of it right now. But they've been... No, God.
No, the Facebook one, right?
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. I can't think of it. But I think the gist of it is type safety was one of the big ones, and then knowing what's coming in and what you're putting out. I think that's the reason why object oriented basically won out, was because of mental mapping.
Type safety C and C, like you don't like that's not foreign to C. Like this method takes in this type, period.
But it doesn't map mentally, right? Just creating a bunch of methods or functions. Like if you have a person, it's easy to say.
How does it not map mentally? I want to open a file. There's a method that opens the file.
I mean, we can take the simple ones, but like it's easy for people to think about a person having an age and a gender and whatever, whereas something, I don't know, you start writing some application and you just have methods and functions all over the place. I think that's where
The difference
people are
is,
like, I don't know.
you mentioned a data structure of a person with properties like a age and sex and whatever, height, but that could just be a simple struct. Like why does it why so now like we want to like add functionality on top of the data structure
and state, right?
Yeah, and that's where like things get weird. So I'm like, a lot of these problems, like you started this whole conversation talking about like the architectural type of thing, like how much do you think about that? And it's like, have we as a developer society, right, kind of pigeonholed ourselves into these problems, these architectural problems, because of object-oriented designs, and then like trying to solve those problems with like, here are the design patterns, and here are the factories and whatever constructors, and like all of these things where it's like, maybe if we had just kept things simple and said like, just create a stupid method, a function, man, like, pass some stuff in and it'll return back a result, and you could easily test that. And we're like, that's too.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I gotta
don't know
something.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've worked in so many different programming languages and they all do it differently. It seems like everybody always ends up pushing back towards OO in the end. I mean, they did it with JS. They did it with PHP, right? Like they did it with Cold Fusion. They did it with like everything.
Because you learned object-oriented. Like if you learned object-oriented, if that's your first language, and then you get on one of these languages at work that's not object-oriented, you're like, how do I get my object-oriented in here? Right?
Yeah,
like
we need that.
Yeah.
And by the way, somebody did ask, this is so funny. Somebody asked in the episode discussion thing when we had mentioned that we had come from Cold Fusion, at least me and Jay-Z, that does anybody even remember Macromedia? And
oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. And then I also remember the original, which was Alaire.
Yeah, man. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Alaire was who started it all.
The lightning bolt.
Yeah, man. So, yeah, that was back in the day.
Yeah. By the way, CoffeeScript and Flow were the languages I was thinking of. Flow was one from Facebook.
Yeah, CoffeeScript was the one I was thinking of. So, yeah, it seems like everybody ends up pushing back over there. But to your point, Outlaw, I mean, there are patterns, domain-driven design. When we talked about that, their whole thing was, it was not inheritance over. It was
composition
over inheritance. Yeah, basically, you have change object type things and all that. So yeah, it's like they try and get rid of the state problem by introducing these patterns on top of it, which gets rid of the whole point of OO to a certain degree. Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm think of it like this: of all the technology and all the years that have gone by, and how many bash scripts do we still write today? Like how many are still relied on, which like at the end of the day, it's like string parsing kind of stuff, but yet so much stuff runs on it, right? Like they're so easy to use and simple, and you could like put one together in like 30 seconds to fix any problem you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, bash scripts are funny. Like they're both like very low level, and in terms of like what you do and how you write it, and like what's available to you, but they're also very high level in that you're orchestrating other applications and like piping input and output. So I don't know. I think it's going to be around for a while.
It will be. All right, so I do have a Boomer Hour thing.
Oh God!
All right,
I've got to throw this out there.
Hold on. If you're going into Boomer Hour, then we can't go into Boomer Hour without a dad joke.
Okay, let's do the dad joke.
Why did Mozart kill all of his chickens?
Fuck.
Because when he asked them who the best composer was, they all answered, "Bach, Bach, Bach."
Ah, nice. Okay. Very nice.
So my Boomer Hour is this. Ask ChatGPT to do something on how to pull some information out of Google Cloud. And it gave me back some code, and I was like, okay.
You're listening to
Fuck.
because when he asked them who the best composer was, they all answered Bach, Bach, Bach.
Ah,
Nice.
nice. Okay. Very nice.
So my boomer hour is this. I asked ChatGPT to do something on how to pull some information out of Google Cloud. And it gave me back some code, and I was like, okay, let me try it. I tried it. It failed. And I was like, all right, that's fine. I mean, they don't live on top of Google stuff, right? Like, so let me ask Gemini, right? Let me ask Gemini the same thing. And it spit me out code that did not work with Google's own tools. And I'm like, really, man? Really? Like, if you have an AI that's telling me how to code on your platform, it should work. Like, and
Well, was that part of your prompt? Was that part of your, like,
Yeah, you got to put that in there.
yeah.
it was, oh man, it was so frustrating. Like, and you want to know the crazy part is, I want to say they both spit out nearly identical stuff. It was almost carbon copy, which makes me wonder, like, are they using the same LLM for this stuff? Like,
Yeah.
is this like, you remember when Bing was accused of, when they didn't have a search result, going and
Yeah.
querying Google to find it and then returning it on their page?
Yeah.
That's what I feel like happened here. And I was so very annoyed.
Yeah, if I had to like add new features to, or pick new features of teams to work on, like it'd be nice to be able to like limit some of the data in my LLMs, like especially for like version things. Like some of the biggest problems I've run into is when I'm like trying to go from a version 7 to an 8, or move from this chart to that chart or something, and I'm like trying to do something there, and it just keeps giving me the old information. I'm like, no, version 8. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Here's the same thing again. Oh,
Right?
geez.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
It'll do sure with an exclamation. Now, I
sure,
will say,
wrong thing again.
ChatGPT. Okay, so I guess stepping out of Boomer Hour for a second, ChatGPT actually impressed me a little bit the other day, because I was asking about some garbage with car sets in Java. And there was one that wasn't there in what I was trying to do, and it was blowing things up. And so I asked, wait, how do I create an alias for something in this? And it spit me back some stuff, and I'm like, man, this absolutely does not work. And then I got to thinking about it, and I was looking, I was like, there's no way this would ever work. And I said, oh, I'm using the OpenJDK version 11. And then it completely said, oh, if you're doing that, they completely changed how this stuff worked, and it spit something out. So I was like, okay, first off, and so that's pretty incredible, right? Like, I don't want to mince words here. Like, that's pretty sweet that it could say it, but I almost feel like if people are using it this way to where they're trying to get information, it should at least tell you, hey, I've spit you out something for Oracle's Java version 8, right? Or something like that, so that you at least have the context of what it's thinking. I don't know. Maybe that's something you could put in a pre-prompt, like, hey, tell me what version that you're using when you're generating this code. But, anyway.
Gemini is pretty good about listing its sources. I don't know about GPT anymore, but that's kind of nice. You can actually see, some version numbers and stuff in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I just was so irritated when Gemini spit out code that didn't work on their own platform. I was like, really? Come on, man.
Well, I think Jay-Z referred to this a while back when we were originally talking about ChatGPT, about it being confidently wrong. And I've definitely experienced that. And I think, like, we've talked about, like, the older the technology, then the better the responses seem to be. But
yes,
any kind of language or technology that is very current and, the change cycle is like hyper, quick, then it starts to fall apart quickly, know.
Yeah, you're in trouble then.
Yeah.
All right. So the next one is actually from MicroG. He sent us an article that is actually pretty interesting, and we're going to skim over it and share some of this stuff with you because it's kind of cool. So it's from a site called Outer Bounds, which I'd never heard of them before. But I guess this is the people that do Metaflow. They have an article called 350 million tokens don't lie. Love and hate in hacker news. So the gist of this is they went back and grabbed all the data from Hacker News that had more than 5 comments between January 2020 and June 2023. And then they used the Llama 3, so that's Facebook or Meta's open source large language model thing that has 70 billion tokens. And then they ran it all through this thing to sort of analyze it to get the sentiment based off the subject or the topic. And so there's some pretty interesting stuff in here.
Yeah, very important to point out 2020 too. Like there was some stuff going on in the world there. It was a little abnormal compared to years around it.
Yeah. 2020 was not the best of times around the planet.
Well, what's going on?
I don't remember. I've got this thing called I can't remember it. Anyways, so what they did is they actually brought up things that have been trending. And so the thing that has the absolute most posts was technology. And then after that was open source, then software development, programming, web development, GitHub, artificial intelligence, JavaScript, and then it goes on down from there. But what's interesting, more than anything, is sort of what has been coming up over time. So again, they started from 2020 and technology has sort of been there and on the rise, which is that, I guess that makes sense. But artificial intelligence was just being talked about in 2020 and now it's up there. Like there's a ton of articles, there's a lot of posts on it. You guys see anything else interesting in this particular one?
Not so much this particular one, but some of the other ones I thought. I don't want to skip ahead though.
So I guess the only software development and open source both seem to be pretty consistent on there. Like those haven't really trended up or down. They just sort of stay with the same number of posts that consistently come through. Machine learning, surprisingly, has actually taken a big bump in 2023. Like I would have thought, if anything, with AI coming on as hot as it did, I would have thought that ML would have sort of taken a dive a little bit. But other than that, everything else looks pretty consistent.
See layoffs jumping up recently.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And they did mention that the top 20 topics are only 10% of the topics covered. So while these are the ones that have a lot more traction, 90% of the topics are different.
And it said it was aggregated from 100,000 pages. So that's a lot of posts, right? Like a whole ton of posts. So then what's declining? This one might be a little bit.
Yeah, this one's interesting. This is where we talked about COVID. Like, so there's a couple of topics right in 2020 that were huge right at the start. Like coronavirus is in there. There's a couple others that are kind of hard to tell the colors. But you can see that there was a huge drop off from like 2020 to 2021, for example. And now those are way down, which is pretty interesting.
Privacy was major at the beginning of all that. And even though it's taken a big drop, it's still up there. Like there's still a lot of people talking about privacy. And I think that probably has a lot to do with AI still, right? Like what's happening with all our data.
Yep. Yeah, so it looks like they've got coronavirus and COVID-19 here separately. They've got public health. So those are the ones that really just dropped at the beginning of the graph. So from 2020 to 2021. Yeah, it's interesting. So there was a big spike in privacy in Apple around September of 2022. So I don't know if there's some news story that broke around then or whatever. That's pretty interesting.
They actually mentioned it in this article somewhere. While you're going forward, I'll see if I can find that. It was their proposed CSAM scanning.
Right. Okay. That's right.
So, Apple kills its plan to scan your photos for CSAM. I don't even know what CSAM is.
Oh, I think this was
child sexual abuse material.
Yeah, I remember at the time it got a bad rep. I thought it was like a good idea, but I think people misunderstood what it was doing, because it's not like it was taking any pictures and sending it up anywhere. It was just like generating a fingerprint or like a hash, for example, of that and comparing it to like, here's a known set, here's the, federal known set of hashes. And if we see these hashes, then we know that you have a copy.
Interesting. Well, yeah, it apparently caused a bit of an uproar at the time, but it's kind of died off.
The story at the time, like there was misunderstanding about like how it was going to work. And so people thought like, oh, all of my photos are being sent to Apple and somebody's looking at them and, comparing them. And it's like, no, that's not how it's going to work. And it could like all sit on device. Cause like having all of those hashes of the known ones could sit on your device. But that was another thing, if I remember correctly, where people thought like, wait, you're going to put the images on mine? And it's like, no.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So the next chart that we see on here is how do people feel about the topics? And he actually writes some stuff on here. I assume it's a he. It might not be. Something that was actually pretty funny is if you look at the sentiment scores across the board, you have a few ones, so basically not much, some twos, threes go way down, fours start climbing up. There's 0 5s in the entire data set. So a sentiment of 5 was completely neutral. And I'm going to read this because it was actually pretty funny. Firstly, the LLM is utterly befuddled about what a neutral discussion looks like. There are no 5 in the results, or maybe there is a snarky note by the LLM noting that humans are incapable of unemotional, unbiased discourse. So,
nice.
So yeah, that was pretty funny, but it does show that I guess it's indication of sentiments on Hacker News is they're mostly positive. So like 6, 7s, and 8s are pretty high. There's not a bunch of 9s, but for the most part, it seems like it's a pretty positive you should value given to these conversations.
Yeah, 0 was the flame war and 9 is perfect harmony. Right.
Yep. And most of it was above 5. Like I'd say most of the weighted stuff is up there. Fours had a decent amount, but then it dropped off pretty bad under that. So that was interesting.
My favorite is the next chart.
The love and hate.
For that. Love and hate, yeah. Things that people love, programming, computer science, open source, game development, Rust, mathematics. I'm like, yes.
How are you gonna skip over Python?
I always
literally
skip over Python.
that line.
I skip over Python every chance I get.
Wow.
Astronomy, awesome. Retro computing, great. Debugging, if you say so. The things that we hate though, like FTX, pretty funny.
Yeah.
Sam Bankman-Fried, yep. Torture, yeah. Employee monitoring, yep. You keep going down. There's some juicy ones in there. My favorite though is car features.
Interesting.
Why I thought
People
you were going to
hate
say
car
Atlassian.
features. No, I also thought that was funny.
That is interesting. I wonder why Atlassian made the hate list.
There was that whole thing with Jira or Atlassian lost some databases and stuff. I don't know. I think people might just hate on Jira.
That's what I assumed it was just Jira bashing and as a generic ticketing system, and then that translated into Atlassian through the machine.
I mean, in fairness, doesn't Jira just get transient hate from the fact that people are tired of dealing with tickets, and so you hate the system where they are? I don't know.
Yeah, you'd hate whatever the new system is too. So
exactly.
It's pretty funny. You can tell it's skewed by events that happened. Like we talked about COVID, but there's some other stuff that happened with like police and stuff around the last couple of years. I think you can see a big reflection of that. I'd really like to see these stats for like the last 20 years, for example, and see just how different it is.
I mean, the pop culture of the time definitely plays a big part of this.
Cost cutting. We hate cost cutting.
Right.
I agree.
I think everybody
also don't like it.
Yeah.
Yep.
The next section is kind of interesting. So they said there's some topics that are just divisive. And what they're saying is that means that sometimes when a topic's posted, it would have a really good sentiment. And sometimes when it's posted, it's like a really negative. And they just pointed out 4 of them here. They're pretty funny. GNOME, specifically KDE versus GNOME. So that war's been raging for 25 years. So it don't matter what you do, it might be good, might be bad.
Yep,
Google, you're muted again, Jay-Z. You gotta quit doing that, man. I see your mouth moving.
Can't win. I didn't have anything interesting to say about it.
Oh, okay. Well, we're glad you unmuted for that. Google, government regulations, and venture capital. So it's a little interesting to me that on Hacker News, where there is a lot of talk about venture capital and startups and all that stuff, that's one of the super divisive subjects. It's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I would have assumed they liked it.
Right?
Yeah, I guess there's bad stories too, but I would have thought, with that audience, that it would have been more popular. But all right.
Imagine with recent news.
What recent news?
We're talking about the Google one, right? Like, what do you?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm not aware of new Google stuff. There's new Google
Which
stuff.
one? Yeah, did I miss something?
I thought you were talking about venture capital.
Oh, sorry. No, about the antitrust, the breaking them up as a monopoly.
Oh,
I
that's
heard about that.
that's about to happen. Yeah.
So-
Is it really?
Well, I mean, they said the same
There's
thing of
talk of it,
Microsoft in
yeah.
the 80s, so who knows?
They're talking
kind of
about it. Yeah.
All right.
I'll believe
I
it
didn't
when
know
I
that.
see
I
it.
missed that headline.
Yeah. And then I guess the last one that's sort of interesting, as they said, is the mood improving. And it looks like it went down slightly, but they said that in August 2021, there was like a downward pull on the line. But for the most part, it looks like it's just pretty consistent. Like it based off their
6.4 to
findings.
6.3.
Yeah, 6.4 to 6.3. Like based off their findings, it seems like the sentiments on a lot of these topics are still just sort of, they're pretty heavy right around the middle, which is a 6, a little above a 6, and then there are outliers on both sides of it. Now, what is weird is at certain times of the year, so this looks like May, September, maybe November of 23, there was a lot of stuff that was either like far outliers on the top and bottom. It'd be interesting to know what those things were at those time periods, but
Yeah.
otherwise, it's pretty good.
I bet their sentiment would be higher if they had a dad joke right now.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
You want to give us some good sentiment?
Sure. How many apples grow on a tree?
All of them.
That is correct.
Woo! Look at
Very
that.
nice.
I got something right.
Well done.
We'll change that
Some
here
are
in a
designed
minute.
in California. I don't know about where they're grown,
Oh, that's
but
true.
her.
That's
Sorry. I should say the rest of the article just kind of talks about how they actually did this using their software. So,
Yep, that's it. Which is Metaflow. Never heard of it. Maybe I'll look into it at some point.
yeah, it's pretty cool. I never would have thought of using LLM to like analyze data set like that.
Well, they actually said in the article, they said that LLMs are surprisingly good at that type of thing. So if you ever want to analyze a large data set, the one that comes to mind is like the Netflix. They had some big data set out there. That would probably be an interesting one. Because at one point, that's what they would run machine learning things on, right? I wonder what AI would do if it came out ahead of what the ML models were.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yep. So
Maybe that's
thank you,
what
Micro G.
Netflix uses to pilot new movies and TV shows on Netflix.
Hopefully not.
Let's just see what the AI generates for us. Oh, greenlit, go make that.
Oh, man.
I'm not saying the quality's gone down.
Yeah, right? Yeah. No, and the price hasn't gone up either, right? So the quality hasn't gone down, the price hasn't gone up. So it's a perfect world.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So thank you again, Micro G, for sending that one out. That was actually pretty cool. And then, so I'm going to take us back a little bit. I had mentioned, I think it was earlier in the year, maybe February, March. I was talking about buying some Omada stuff and redoing my network. And I finally took some time to do some of it. And good Lord, I bought 1,000 feet of Cat 8 network cable. That stuff is so thick. And it's not a problem until you go to put the RJ45 connector on it. So typically when you're running wires and stuff through your house or whatever, you're cutting that wire to length, right? Like you're not going and buying a 50-foot wire and then running it somewhere. You cut them. Well, that wouldn't be a problem if the RJ45 heads, like the connectors that get plugged into things, weren't a standard size, and you got to fit this thick wrapped cable inside this stuff. And I probably burnt 5 of those connectors trying to make a good connection, because what would happen is when I'd put the things in there, the wire is actually thicker than like a Cat 6 or a Cat 5, And then the jacket around it's also thicker. So if those things are in the perfect spot when you try to clamp that connector on, it'll actually push off and push through two wires at the same time. And so you have wires that are cross connecting. And so if you run like a test on it, you'll see that 1 and 2 are lit up, and it's like, oh, come on, man. So yeah, I mean, I was up on a ladder for like 30 minutes replacing the head on like 3 or 4 times before I got it right. But I finally did, and it was real good. But man, that stuff, it is seriously twice as thick, maybe even more than a Cat 5e cable. It is ridiculous. But it's pretty cool once you get it working. So thought I'd share.
How many cats can you send down the wire at the same time on it?
Ooh, I don't know.
Just 8. It's literally in the name. It's
they're
limited to 8.
Yes.
All right. Well, like we said before, if you haven't left us a review, we would greatly appreciate it. You can find some helpful links at www.codingblocks.net/review. 1 stars and above are appreciated. I got that right? I think I got it right. It's like golf, right? The lower the score is better. Is it?
I think treat it more like par. Let's do more like par. The higher, the better. Well,
that sounds like sports. I don't know what you're talking about.
Sorry.
Okay.
We'll go back to maths.
All right.
So now it's time for the portion of the show where I get destroyed.
Mental blocks. Let's go.
Yep. This is my favorite portion of the show. Mental blocks. Here we go. So this is 240. So according to Tucko's trademark rules of engagement, Joe, you are up first.
Okay.
The categories are books in the series, and I will give you the book titles. You give me the series.
Okay.
Sports team homophones.
Ooh, okay.
Autobiographies.
Okay, great.
1 belly button, 2 nipples. Elementary pop culture. And oaths.
Books in the series.
Really, Joe? All right.
I mean, you heard what else I got?
Yeah. I was really wanting you to pick the autobiographies.
Yeah, right. Never.
What's your number?
Oh, always 5.
Oh, 5. Okay. Philip Pullman, The Golden Compass. I'm assuming Philip Pullman is the author, by the way. The titles are The Golden Compass, The Subtle Knife, The Amber Spyglass.
Oh, no. Oh, man. I've seen the movies. I am aware of the books. I cannot remember the series. Golden Compass. It has like a cool name, too. Polar Bears. Polar Bear King.
Is that you're finding out? Do you want to call a friend?
No. That was I was trying to. No, that's not it. Oh man, it's got some cool name. I'm gonna kick myself. Hold on, let me Google it.
I think that's how this works.
I mean, I just am gonna have to. It's something like The Familiars or something. No, homunculus. Though it's got the people have like the animals with the soul in them, and I give up.
The Chronicles of Narnia, wasn't it?
No.
You're both wrong. It is.
I mean, it's similar.
His Dark Materials.
That's what I meant. What a cool name! Like, what does that even mean?
So obvious.
It does remind me of the Chronicles of Narnia, though. I could actually name. I think I could name every book in the Chronicles of Narnia right now. Just
man,
in order.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I'll try. I think there's 7. Lion the
Are
Mr.
there
Wardrobe.
7 really?
Yep.
All right.
Boys of the Dawn Treader. I've already forgotten the one. I just thought of this one too. And then we go. So we're skipping that one. Silver Chair, wasn't it? And then okay. Actually, I can't even name half of them. Never mind.
So,
dude.
Alan, you're up next.
That was terrible.
Wait. I can get them though. Here, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Wait, you're
Prince
reading?
Caspian. I am reading. I don't
Prince
know.
Caspian.
Yep, Prince Caspian, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, The Horse and His Boy, never heard of that one.
Yeah.
The Magician's Nephew, never heard of that one. And The Last Battle.
Dang it.
Yeah, I would have never.
I had the set when I was a kid. I read them at least once.
The Hardy Boys, man. That was mine.
Oh, that was good stuff.
Yeah, I like the Hardy Boys.
All right. Here you go, Alan. Here's your categories.
All right.
African history. Different songs, same titles, where I'll give you the artist and you need to name the song title they all have in common.
Ooh.
Geography and a little math. Uranus Shermanus. Main attractions. And, quote, ladies first, where each correct response will begin with the word lady.
Main attraction for 5.
Maine, like the state of Maine.
The state.
Yeah.
Oh,
So here you go.
Problem. Can I change?
Yeah, you want to change that one.
I'll allow it since I wasn't clear on that one. In further record, Uranus Shermanus is, in reference to the planet.
Let's do the artist one. The artist and the song one. Yeah.
The different songs, same titles.
Yeah, that one.
For 5, you said?
For 5.
All right. Def Leppard, Nickelback, Ed Sheeran. And here's your hint. So you can keep me inside the pocket of your ripped jeans.
Oh, man. Oh, this is going to really frustrate me. I don't know, dude.
Joe?
No.
Joe for the steal?
The 3 bands were Def Leppard, Ed Sheeran, and what was the other one?
Nickelback.
Photograph.
That is correct.
Come on, man.
All right. So let me note that.
Woo.
5. All right. So.
That's not fair. But Nickelback only has one song, though, so what are you going to do?
I don't think they would appreciate you saying that. All right. So here you go. Joe, your category titles are Know Your Ologies, where each correct response will end with ology. Tiny Desk Concerts.
Ooh.
Personal Finance. Oh, man. I can't pronounce this word.
Imagine.
Just pretend that the made-up word I'm going to say is like legit and right, because I don't know what this is.
Okay.
Sojourner Truth? Is that a word?
Yeah, Sojourner. Yeah.
What?
Okay.
Temporary resident? Okay, I've never heard of that word before, but scientist and Celebrity Jeopardy ain't the only CJ. And where like CJ will be the initials of all of the correct responses.
Wow. So is there a description of Tiny Desk Concerts?
I'm sorry, what?
Is there a description of Tiny Desk Concerts?
No.
Use it in a sentence.
I'm assuming
It's the etymology.
Right.
What first came to mind is probably wrong because I immediately thought of the NPR Tiny Desk.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Performances.
You ever see the Guar one?
But
It's pretty good.
I'm not sure if that's correct or not, so I would not.
Yeah. I bet it is.
Your
but,
risk.
I'm going to go with Know Your Ology for 5.
Okay.
I need to steal real bad.
You might get it.
If your PhD is in the similarities of folk songs from, here we go, proper nouns again. From I'm sure these can be pronounced. It's right. Bhutan and Cameroon. You are an expert in ethno this.
Folk songs from Cameroon and Bhutan.
Yep. I think that's what I said.
Ethno somethingology. This is not the right answer, but I'm going to go with ethnomusicology.
That is correct.
I'm going to be so mad because I was going to say the same thing, man. Oh, that's
I mean,
ridiculous.
they gave it to you. That's ridiculous.
I can't get a break.
Why would that,
I can't
why would
get a
that be
break.
the answer?
It's ridiculous.
I don't know why, but it is. All right, so Alan, you get another chance, but you get all. You're listening to Coding Blocks episode.
Let's hear it.
You want to give us some good sentiment?
Sure. How many apples grow on a tree?
Okay, great.
One belly button, two nipples. Elementary
okay.
pop cultures.
Eight episodes. That's amazing.
Woo.
Quietly.
Yeah, I'm just trying to lead the witness over there.
Struggling to think of the name because I just don't think about it.
Yeah, we read it way back in the day. And
Yeah.
that was it.
In charge of making sure that, if you've got a deployment or a replication controller, there's
Here, Joe.
okay. Yeah. So I was asking GPT. Well, I was asking Claude. Actually, you recommended it a couple episodes ago, or maybe last episode, for some suggestions on things to talk about, and it mentioned a basically trivia. So I looked up and I tried doing a couple different flavors. I couldn't really find stuff. What the heck? That I liked, but then I did find one for Kubernetes trivia, and we won't do all these, but I thought it might be fun to do a couple of them. And I thought the questions were actually pretty good, but they tell you the answer. So I am not going to be able to play, but I'll just stepped away, so this will be interesting. So don't look at this article. But
Okay.
the first question is: blank runs on each node and ensures containers are running in a pod. Blank runs on each node and ensures containers are running in a pod. Do you think it's kubelet, etcd, scheduler, or pod?
Kubelet.
Yeah, that's the right answer. But even as asking that, the reason I even got here is we work with Kubernetes, spend a lot of time with it, but there's some things that I just don't really think about. I very much spend the time doing stuff with Kubernetes that I spend my time doing stuff with, and that's definitely not indicative of the whole ecosystem. So I have some pretty big blind spots. So that'd be kind of interesting. And kubelet's one of those things that if they didn't give it to you in multiple choice, I would have been really struggling to think of the name because I just don't think about it.
Yeah, we read it way back in the day. And
Yeah.
that was it.
Yeah, I don't think about it. So how about this one? Blank manages the assigning of nodes to pods depending on resource availability. I usually think of it as
the
pods to
inverse
nodes.
of that. Yeah, it's pods to nodes. That'd be the
Crazy
scheduler.
strange.
That's the scheduler.
Yep, and other options just for fun: etcd, kubectl, and flannel ID or flannel D. So that was good. Let's see here. Is this a good one? As soon as a service starts, blank daemon running on each node adds a set of environment variables on the pod for each active service. As soon as the service starts, a blank daemon running on each node adds a set of environment variables on the pod for each active service.
Let's get those multiple choice there.
All right, we've got kubectl, kubelet, kubeadm, kubeadmin, or service discovery.
I'm going to say service discovery.
So in this case, it does say it's the kubelet again. But just so to read it back, as soon as a service starts,
Yep.
Kubernetes, which can represent a number of things, but maybe it's a port on a node, maybe it's a internal load balancer, external load balancer, something like that. As soon as that starts, the kubelet daemon running on each node will add a set of environment variables on each pod for each active service.
That's interesting.
I didn't know that. The environment, like I could understand like a DNS entry or something like that. That makes sense to me. But saying a set of environment variables is interesting.
I wonder when it's said to each pod, I wonder if it goes through every single pod that's running on that node to do it. That's interesting. So that it knows how to communicate, maybe. But that's why your DNS makes more sense. I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And so there is a little explanation down at the bottom. It says the environment variables provide important information and configuration details for the service to function correctly within the cluster. But I don't know why each pod would need to know about that. Yeah. So that's interesting. So something to look into. And we'll do, say, 2 more.
All right.
Next one is the kubelet. Wait, that's the explanation. The replication controllers and deployment controllers are part of blank. Is it the API controller manager, etcd manager, master controller manager, or kube admin?
I would have. Wow. Probably the API controller.
Yeah, that would have been my guess. It does say it's the master controller manager.
Interesting. No, I don't even know what that is.
No. Yeah, this is stuff that, again, like I said, is like, I just have a total blind spot on this kind of side of things. Like, if you want to know how to like make a pod, tail dev null, then I got your back. Could do that all day long. But no, it says the master controller manager is responsible for managing different controllers in Kubernetes, such as replication controllers and deployment controllers. They're crucial for ensuring the desired state of the cluster, managing the scaling and replication of pods, handling updates and rollbacks. So I guess when you think about it that way, it kind of makes sense that the master controller is in charge of making sure that, if you've got a deployment or a replication controller, there's a pod there. And the API, I guess if you think of the API as being like almost like a separate interface that can optionally communicate with things like the master controller, then it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But the API
I don't
is
even
what
remember reading about that.
No,
yeah.
Me either. That's interesting. Oh, here's another cool one. Blank is a special namespace that is used for special purposes like bootstrapping a cluster.
All right, give them to me.
Special namespace used for special purposes like bootstrapping cluster. Kube public, kube private, kube system, or default.
Kube system.
That's what I would have guessed, but it's kube public.
Really?
I know it's not default because I've used default by default all the time.
Right. Accidentally.
Yep. Kube public is a namespace used for special purposes like bootstrapping a cluster. It's publicly readable and contains resources that should be accessible to all users and services in the cluster. Commonly used for storing cluster-wide resources that need to be accessed by multiple users or services, such as cluster-wide configuration maps or public secrets.
And this is why when somebody says to rate yourself on a 0 to 10 or 0 to 9 scale on something, you never say 9.
Yeah, never
10.
say 9. Yeah, it's good that this makes me want to study more. Even just seeing that there's questions that like I wouldn't even have known to ask that.
Right.
So, yeah, maybe I should look more into it.
Pretty good.
And this is a cool set. So let's see how many questions are there on here. This is on a website called proproofs.com. I've never seen it before. It's got 18 of them. This is made by Godwin. I'm not going to try to say their last name, and database administrator. But they just created this little quiz here. It's pretty cool.
That's pretty neat. Huh.
All right. So, I do have another one that was kind of in a different order. I don't know who put this next item on the list, but I can jump ahead if we want to do that.
Yeah, you can jump ahead.
All right. So, for fun, I mentioned asking Claude earlier for some ideas about things to talk about. I was thinking, the Olympics are going on right now in 2024.
They were.
Over in Paris. They're over?
Yeah, they're over. It's only 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay, only 2 weeks.
They ended last weekend. Yep.
Well, dang. Now I can go watch it and fast forward to the boring parts, right?
That's right.
All right. So I asked what kind of competitions might exist in a humorous version of the Olympics for programmers. And I know they have like code Olympics and stuff like that, or like a lot of times it's like algorithms and stuff, but I wanted to see like some kind of more fun type of kind of challenges that you might have. Almost like there's I think the Office episode. Remember that show, The Office? Yeah. They had like Olympics and it was they doing like paper ball or like basketball with the paper or whatever, trash, that sort of thing. So that's the kind of stuff I was looking for, and it gave me a couple examples, but I didn't know if you had any ideas first you might want to share.
Man, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. No.
Yeah, I was trying to think, like, realistically, I think it'd be cool to have like debugging challenges where there's actually a problem in some code, some sort of defect, and you have to figure it out faster.
Sounds like a hackathon almost.
Bug, like a bug squashing, or what do they call it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a better term for that I can't think of.
But you said a humorous version.
Yeah, I wanted humorous, not a real one.
Yeah, so bug squashing wouldn't be it. I don't know. Maybe who could make the worst efficient application possible, right? Like something like that. Something that, outside of an infinite loop, how would you squash the processor or something,
Yeah, I was almost thinking, like, if you could somehow give everyone on the competition a cough and a mute button, have them like say the alphabet, and who could, we know it's not going to be me. I tend to leave the mute button on too much, but I don't know. Seems like that should be a sport.
So what did they come up with?
Here's a couple of good ones. I'll read some of the highlights. The Stack Overflow copy and paste sprint.
Oh,
You give you some sort of coding problem, and you've got to go to coding blocks to Stack Overflow, get the answer, and paste it back for anyone else. Here's a legit good one: the keyboard shortcut gymnastics. That's kind of like code golf we've talked about a little bit, but with keyboard shortcuts. So performing tasks with as few keystrokes as possible. Legacy code archaeology, something we talked about earlier this episode. So find some sort of bug and timed event in a legacy code base. Whiteboard algorithms, kind of explaining rubber duck debugathon. There could be maybe some style points there for how you talk to your little buddy.
That's pretty cool that this came up with these. I mean,
yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, they're decently creative.
Yeah. Here we go. Extreme refactoring. Transform terribly written code into clean, efficient code as fast as possible. And the last one, the Midnight Miracle Marathon. Simulates shipping a product under ridiculous deadlines filled only with pizza and energy drinks.
That's real. That's not actually humorous.
That's real. I don't want to do that again.
Yeah, that's not fun. I've done it a few times in my life.
Yep.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Thanks, Claude.
Yep. And Claude was the AI extraordinaire.
Yep.
So I actually did this other one.
Oh, okay.
So I basically seem to run into this all the time, and it feels like it hasn't really changed much in 20 years. So data gathering and cleansing and parsing. So the whole ETL thing that exists, like, why is it not much better? For example, I mentioned in Boomer Hour, the Gemini thing. Like, I wanted to retrieve a list of metrics, custom metrics that are stored in a GCP project. And a lot of stuff in GCP you can access via the CLI, right? So it's usually like a G-Cloud command, and it's pretty easy. This one doesn't exist. And so this one you have to go digging through the documentation to even find an endpoint to hit. But then once you find it, they sort of trick you into thinking you can use like this Swagger type thing, but they don't even have the try button highlighted. So then it was like, okay, just give me the code so I can do it, right? So I finally got some code working, not thanks to Gemini or even ChatGPT, but then I got that data and it's in JSON, right? And now I need to do something with it. And this is the part that frustrates me, right? And tell me if you have a different experience. So we have all these tools out there. You could take this data and load it into a database table, right? But then that's probably going to be something like transforming from the JSON into fields or columns or collections, like depending on whether you're doing a Mongo or a relational database, whatever. So there's that. And if you actually want to analyze this data and especially compare it with other data sets, so for instance, like one of the things that I was looking to do was, hey, show me metrics that exist here that also exist in another project so I'll know that they'll collide or not if I were to scope these two projects so I could look at all the metrics in one spot. So I wanted to know the overlap in case there was going to be any problems, any collisions, right? Well, man, like, okay, So now it makes sense if you're going to load it into a relational database, but that's going to be a few extra steps because now you're going to have a whole ETL thing to get it in there. I decided I was going to go the pandas route because, Jupyter notebooks and all that kind of stuff, pandas is made for analyzing data and all that. But that was painful too. Like, why is it so difficult even 20 years later? Because I've been doing this for a long time. Why is it so difficult to get data and analyze data in meaningful ways? I mean, I guess that's the reason why data scientists exist, because this stuff isn't fun or easy for the most. I say it's not fun. It feels like a bunch of rinse and repeat. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Seems like there ought to be a tool. It'd be kind of nice. Like, there's some things like, people say like, oh, I've got a memory leak, and everyone says use a profiler. Like, I'd like to be able to say like, I've got some data mapping issues and cleansing to do, and people would jump up and say, use some sort of mapping tool that makes it all easy.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like we're still solving the same kind of rote problems year after year.
Yeah, I mean, we had a sponsor a while back, and I can't remember the name of them right now, but their whole thing was being able to load up data sets and like sort of almost drag and drop things. Outlaw probably remembers the name of them. Do you?
Well, I was waiting for more context about it.
Where you load up data sets and you could interact with the data sets, like they had tables and stuff, and you could almost like join them real time, filter them. I remember there was something like that for start with an R, like re something. Dang it. But I thought it was related to like APIs and stuff, not necessarily data sets. It was all kinds of stuff. You could load data from all kinds of places. But I mean, I guess that's my frustration, right? Like, if you're pulling data from the cloud, you want to get a list of data from the cloud that you can examine on your own. It might come in JSON, it might come in a list form, it might come in whatever, and then you pull data from somewhere else, and it's going to be another one. You got to transform all that stuff. It almost feels like there should be a tool that you can point at something, and it can almost like intelligently do some stuff for you. And then if you want to join them, awesome. If you want to union them, awesome. Like, it feels like this problem has been solved a million times the same way. There should be a better way.
Retool was the one I was thinking of.
Retool, yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. I find that I'm doing that kind of stuff, and every time I'm like, I end up looking like, isn't there a better way? Isn't there an easier way? Should I find a database that makes it real easy to suck this data in, instead of like, the SQL Server is super powerful, but I don't want to use SSMS to bring data in, right? Like, I don't want to go that far. I just want to, hey, pull this JSON in and stick it in something that I can use and join and query. So maybe somebody's going to be like, oh, moron, it's this. Go find this tool. I hope if you actually have that tool, codingblocks.net/episode 240, leave us a comment. I would love, and we'll share it on the next episode, because there's got to be a better way. There has to be a better way.
Yeah, you can hit me up at Theo in Slack.
There you go.
All right.
So we go on to Alan's favorite portion of the show.
Yes,
it's the tip of the week.
There we go.
All right. So, I mentioned on the Kubernetes trivia section, I'm kind of like re-examining a few things that I've kind of taken for granted and recognizing that there's some things that just have big holes in. One of those is I just for fun, I Googled for Docker tips. And I assume that I'm going to know them all because I, deal with Docker kind of a lot. And I was surprised to see an article on Docker's website called 8 Top Docker Tips for 2024. And I thought, hey, if there's some new tip out there that I haven't heard of, it'll probably be here. And the first tip, right out the gate, is really interesting. So it's enable Virtio FS for faster file sharing on Macs. I use a Mac. I've never heard of Virtio FS. It's a setting in Docker Desktop where you can go in there and click it. Sounds pretty cool. Oh, I may, maybe it defaults to that. I don't know. I'm gonna have to go check it out. But even going through the rest of them, there's some stuff we've talked about on the show before, like strategically layering, for getting good Docker cache. And there's some kind of some kind of standard tips that have been around for a long time now. They do mention like mount types cache and MTM, which is something we've talked about a little bit, and like a kind of a smart pattern for NPM installing so that you can kind of not have to re-download all those NPM files that we've talked about, how big that can be. There was a couple of other in here that I thought were really interesting. Let's see here. I'm getting down. Docker ignore, of course. Docker init we've talked about as well. Docker Scout. Ever heard of Docker Scout?
Yes, only because it posted at me every time I do something.
Oh, yeah. Okay, nice. Yeah, so Docker Scout is basically a tool for looking for vulnerabilities in your Docker images. I'm sure that Docker has some sort of managed service that will help you with this. So you just have to pay a little bit of money, but it's interesting. So that's cool. Also, I saw Docker Build Cloud, which is also probably another managed service that you can use to pay Docker some money, and they'll do your builds remotely. But I just think that remote Docker builds is kind of an interesting thing anyway. The big benefit of remote Docker builds is that if you got multiple people building similar images, then there's some caching that can happen kind of between people, and you can make you can get rid of some redundancies that happen beyond people. So like if I pull in the morning and Outlaw pulls in the morning, whichever one of us kind of kicks off that build first might end up caching artifacts and layers that the next person can use, which is nice. But the downside of cloud builds is also there's going to be some network traffic, and so I don't know the trade-offs exactly, but I do like the idea of my computer not melting when I do a bunch of builds. So that was interesting. And the last one I would have mentioned was Docker Debug, which is something that I've never heard of before, but it's a tool that changes the game. They say it's like being handed a magnifying glass and a detailed map. It's basically an upgrade to Docker Build that brings in a couple tools that make it easier to kind of step through things and figure out what's going wrong in a build, which sounds pretty nice because I feel like an idiot for telling people now, like, here's what I do. I go into the file, I modify it to change these things, and I add a run echo whatever, and and then I do a Docker run start. Like when you think about it, like that's like, why am I doing these weirdo steps and like potentially messing up my files and kind of goofing up the things that I'm committing when there's probably a better tool for that. And there is a better tool, and it's called Docker Debug. And so I'll be checking that out pretty soon here. Oh, and the last tip, just for completeness sake, is test containers, which is something we've talked about before, which is pretty cool.
And those are really good. They can be useful.
Yep.
All right. So on mine, there was that car set thing that I was talking about that drove me a little bit crazy this week. Well, one of the things that somebody mentioned,
it car set, by the way.
Yeah, it should be character set, but yeah, anyways, I mean, char set, car set, care set. I don't know. So one of the ways that somebody mentioned that you could potentially fix what I was running into where this care set wasn't available in the JDK, more or less, is you could use what was called a Java agent. That is something that you can actually pass in at the runtime. So when you call Java and then pass in the jar, whatever it is you're trying to run, you can also pass an argument called Java agent. And I never even heard of this. And the gist of it is this. It was basically made for people to be able to instrument Java applications. So this is something that starts up before your main Java app does, and it allows you to modify the bytecode of the running Java application. So apparently, from what I understand, this is actually how IDEs do a lot of stuff, where they'll start up your application and they can sort of intercept and modify things to run the way they want. It's also what's used for instrumentation. So if you want to get, how fast is this running or whatever, you can do that without putting things all throughout your code. So the Java agent is a pretty powerful byte weaving type thing, or bytecode weaving type thing that is available to you. I have a link to sort of the explanation of it. Obviously use at your own risk, because anytime you're modifying the underlying bytecode for something that you're running, you potentially introduce a lot of problems. So, it's there. Very cool that it exists. I ended up not going that route, but pretty neat. And then this just reminded me, I might have even shared this sometime before on Coding Blocks, but because Jay-Z just went through some Docker tips, one of the things that we've talked about in the past is telepresence, and telepresence allows you to sort of modify how you develop things, right? So if you're working in Kubernetes, Mirror D is also a Kubernetes thing. If you're working in Kubernetes and you need to access the cluster as if you were sitting in the cluster, right? Like you want to run something in an IDE on your machine and you want it to feel like it's in the cluster so it has access to all the DNS of everything, can access services and all that. Telepresence allows you to do that. Well, one of the problems with telepresence is you actually have to install a daemon on your machine itself. You also have to install some things in the cluster itself. And maybe there's some situations where, you don't have the rights to do that in the cluster and you're not going to be able to do it. Well, Mirror D gets around that. I forget exactly what they actually have some sort of architecture layout as to how it works, but the gist of it, if I remember correctly, oh, here it is. It's actually, if you go straight to the docs page on the introduction, you don't actually have a daemon running on your machine and you don't actually have to have anything installed into the cluster. It will actually run something I believe is like a sidecar on a pod, and your machine can talk to that sidecar, which will then sort of get you into that same state. Now, I haven't had a chance to work on this yet. It's actually something I want to try, mainly because the folks on my team that use Macs, we're perfectly fine with telepresence. The people that are using Windows mostly are running WSL or WSL2, and there seems to be some sort of network problem with telepresence. We never could get it to work on their machines, and it may not be telepresence's fault. It might be some endpoint protection or something that we have running, but the gist of it is, I think this would circumvent all that because you're not running some other layer in between. So
It's not free though.
we'll see. It actually is. There is an open source version that is free. And that is another thing that's annoying about Mirror D is it looks like it's not free at all. It looks like you have to pay for it. But if you go to the docs, I think on that page, there's something about open source somewhere. You'll see there is. Oh yeah, you can click the open source link up there at the top, and then it takes you to another page where you can do stuff. Now there are some.
Wait, open source link at the top of where?
The introduction page in the first paragraph, or right there, right above it, it says introduction. Right below that, it says available for, and you can click open source. And so you can install this thing. Now there are some features just like telepresence that are only available in the enterprise version or the paid version, but the primary feature set of it is available in the free and open version of it. So you can use it. But yes, to Outlast's point, I actually went through the same thing. I looked at it, I was like, man, I thought it was free. They've made it to where it sort of leads you down the paid path the hardest way, or
Wait a minute.
the most convenient way.
I'm still trying to get to the open source version.
Click docs.
Yep, I saw that, and then available for
introduction,
and
open
then,
source.
But
Yep.
all of this is documentation for the other versions. How do I get to the?
Click the quick start under. Oh well, it takes you to the same thing.
It's just documentation for it. So
They
there is
have it. So the brew
GitHub.
install is free. The brew install one, or even the curl version, brings down the free stuff. But if you start doing things like the Visual Studio Code extension, I can't remember if that's free. The operator, I believe you have to pay for. So yeah, there's some things you got to fish through it. So I do want to test it though, because again, I think this may work in situations where telepresence, you don't have access to the cluster to make changes and that kind of stuff. So I have not had a chance to get into it yet, but the plan is to do it soon.
So I found the GitHub version. Curious license, MIT license.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are you paying for then if you don't have to pay for it?
They have it somewhere.
There's a VS
Mirror D
Code
operator
extension.
So the operator is one of the things that you're paying for. So it says right here, excuse me, if you go to their pricing, it says everything you love about Mirror D open source Plus, Miradii for Teams includes the Miradii operator, which runs in your staging Kubernetes cluster, unlocking concurrent access to Miradii targets,
Nice.
RBAC, session management, and more.
That is shady.
Yeah, you don't have to pay for the fundamental feature of what it